Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. And today we're tackling something pretty huge. Bitcoin breaking $100,000.
Yeah. It's not just another price milestone. It feels like a whole new chapter.
Exactly.
Mm.
And to make sense of it all, we've got some incredible insights from Michael Saylor,
Ah, Sailor.
founder of MicroStrategy, the single biggest corporate holder of Bitcoin in the world.
Oh, wow.
And this interview was right after Bitcoin hit six figures,
Yeah.
so it's super timely.
Oh, that's got to be juicy. Let's dive in.
Okay, so one of the things that really struck me is how Saylor sees this price point as a sign that Bitcoin's here to stay.
Oh, yeah. It's like all those early doubts are gone. Like, is it just a fad or is it for real? I mean, hitting $100,000 is a pretty strong statement.
It's a statement. And he even said this marks the end of Bitcoin's crazy years.
The crazy years. Huh. I kind of like that.
Right. It's like the Wild West is over.
Yeah.
It's becoming more mainstream, more legitimate. I see what you mean. And the funny thing is, even MicroStrategy's own journey with Bitcoin has been anything but boring.
Oh, tell me about it. Sailor actually called their first Bitcoin purchase back in 2020 an act of desperation.
Desperation. Wow. What was going on there?
They were facing some serious challenges, and Bitcoin was this huge gamble.
A Hail Mary?
Kinda. But then they started raising billions of dollars at these super low interest rates to buy more Bitcoin.
So they went all in.
Wow. Yeah, and they became this major force in the market. But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh, I bet. So what kind of storms did they have to weather?
Well, there was China's mining ban. The whole debate about Bitcoin's energy use. Remember Elon Musk's tweets?
Oh, yeah, like he was going to accept Bitcoin for Tesla and then he backtracked.
Exactly. And then, of course, the crypto winter Bitcoin crashed from $66,000 down to $16,000.
Oof, talk about a roller coaster.
An 80% drop, that had to be stressful.
I can't even imagine. So how did they handle all that pressure?
Well, they came up with this audacious plan. They call it the 2021 plan.
Okay, 2021 plan. What's that all about?
Their goal is to raise $42 billion to invest in Bitcoin.
$42 billion. That's
Wow.
insane.
It's a game changer. And they're not stopping there. They pulled off the largest equity shelf registration in history.
Equity shelf registration. Okay, break that down for me.
It basically means they're creating a way for more investors to get involved.
So they're not just betting on Bitcoin. They're changing how the whole system works.
Exactly. And it all comes back to this idea that Saylor has, that Bitcoin is more than just another currency.
Right, it's digital capital.
Exactly, which is a really important distinction to understand.
Okay, so explain it to me. Like I'm 5.
Okay, so think of currencies like dollars, euros, yen. You use them for everyday transactions, buying coffee, paying bills.
Got it.
Capital, on the other hand, is more like owning a house or stocks. It's about storing and growing wealth over time.
So it's the difference between spending money and investing it.
Exactly. And Saylor's argument is that Bitcoin is digital gold, a superior store of value for the digital age.
Ah, yes. The Bitcoin as digital gold comparison.
We knew that was coming. But here's the thing. Saylor actually pushes back against the fear that Bitcoin could be banned. Like what happened with gold in the past.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how does he justify that? Because governments have definitely messed with gold before.
Right. He uses some pretty interesting historical examples. He talks about Queen Elizabeth seizing Spanish gold to weaken their military.
Wow.
And how the Spanish Armada itself struggled because they were relying on gold for payments.
Fascinating. Okay, so how do those examples relate to Bitcoin?
Well, his point is that gold, being a physical asset, is vulnerable to confiscation and manipulation.
So someone can literally just take it from you.
Right, but Bitcoin exists on a decentralized network, so it's incredibly difficult to control or ban.
So it's like comparing apples and oranges.
Exactly. They might both be valuable, but they have very different properties.
That makes sense. So it sounds like MicroStrategy is really putting all these ideas into practice. Like, how are they actually using Bitcoin to their advantage?
Well, their strategy is pretty clever. They're figuring out ways to strip certain elements of Bitcoin, like its volatility, to offer more stable returns for investors who are a little bit more risk averse.
Hold on, stripping elements of Bitcoin. That sounds like financial alchemy.
It kind of is. Imagine you have a whole Bitcoin, which is known for its wild price swings. They're creating financial instruments where investors can benefit from Bitcoin's potential upside, but without all the drama.
It's like owning a piece of real estate, but without the headaches of being a landlord.
Exactly. And this allows them to attract more capital while maximizing their own Bitcoin holdings.
Pretty slick. So what about other companies? What advice does Saylor have for them? especially those sitting on massive piles of cash.
He actually presented his ideas to Microsoft.
Oh, wow. What'd he say?
He basically criticized traditional investment strategies, like dividends, buybacks, mergers, and acquisitions. He thinks they often destroy shareholder value.
So what's his alternative?
He says make a significant Bitcoin investment.
Whoa, that's bold.
Right. He believes companies like Microsoft could unlock huge value by shifting their approach.
So he's really pushing this idea of Bitcoin as a superior store of value.
Absolutely. But there's a catch. He's not a fan of every development in the Bitcoin world.
Really? I thought he was all in on Bitcoin.
He is. But he's cautious about rapid development and constant upgrades to the Bitcoin protocol. He thinks that overfunded, enthusiastic developers can actually be a threat.
Whoa.
He actually said that.
Yeah, he even compared ambitious Bitcoin upgrades to forcible mutations that lead to monstrosity.
Okay, that's a pretty vivid image.
Right.
So what's he worried about? Well, he's worried about adding unnecessary complexity, creating unintended consequences that could actually harm the network.
Makes sense. Like with anything complex, sometimes less is more.
Exactly. And it's interesting because, for someone who's so bullish on Bitcoin, he's actually quite conservative when it comes to messing with the code.
Yeah. So what about all the Bitcoin skeptics out there, the no-coiners? How did Saylor respond to them?
He actually makes this fascinating comparison to scientific breakthroughs. Okay.
He talks about William Harvey, the guy who discovered the circulatory system.
Right.
And how when Harvey first proposed his theory, it was met with huge resistance from the medical establishment.
They just couldn't wrap their heads around it.
Right. They couldn't accept that blood circulates throughout the body, even though it's pretty easy to prove.
So it's like those who thought the Earth was flat. It just takes time for groundbreaking ideas to sink in.
Exactly. And Saylor seems to think Bitcoin represents that kind of generational shift, a fundamental change in how we think about money and value.
Okay. That's a pretty big idea. So if Bitcoin really is this paradigm shift, this digital gold, what does that mean for everyday people like us?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
Right? And it's one that Saylor himself seems to be grappling with. Remember, he said he'd be buying Bitcoin forever, even at $1 million a coin.
Yeah, that's some serious conviction.
It is. But it begs the question, if he's right about Bitcoin being digital capital, what should we be doing? Should we be diversifying into Bitcoin? And if so, how much?
I'm definitely feeling that FOMO. But before we all rush out to buy Bitcoin, I'm curious about the bigger picture. How could governments and institutions approach this? Saylor mentioned this idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. What's that all about?
Well, he's suggesting that governments start thinking about Bitcoin the same way they think about gold reserves. He even proposed that the U.S. could sell some of its gold holdings, which he calls a shiny dead rock.
Shiny dead rock. I like that.
And use the proceeds to buy Bitcoin.
Interesting.
His argument is that this would not only benefit the U.S., but also weaken its adversaries, many of whom hold substantial gold reserves.
Okay, so it's like a strategic move.
Exactly. It's a bold idea, for sure, and somewhat controversial.
It definitely challenges traditional economic thinking. But Saylor takes it even further. He suggests that the U.S. should embrace digital currencies, but specifically those backed by U.S. dollar equivalents. So what's the reasoning there?
He believes this would solidify the U.S. dollar's position as the global reserve currency. Imagine a world where stablecoins, which are digital currencies pegged to the U.S. dollar, become the go-to medium of exchange for trillions of dollars in global transactions.
Okay.
This would create massive demand for U.S. treasuries, further strengthening the U.S. economy.
So he envisions a future where the U.S. dollar and Bitcoin coexist, each playing a distinct but crucial role in the global financial system.
Precisely. It's a compelling vision. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about MicroStrategy's own Bitcoin holdings. They're sitting on a mountain of Bitcoin, over 400,000 coins, which is about 2% of the total supply. How much is enough for them?
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people are asking, but Saylor's response is pretty straightforward. There's no limit. He sees MicroStrategy as a bridge between the traditional financial world and the Bitcoin economy. And he believes they'll keep accumulating Bitcoin indefinitely. He even hinted that as Bitcoin's value rises, they might start buying billions of dollars worth at a time.
Wow, that's commitment. But as we talked about earlier, Saylor is cautious about certain aspects of Bitcoin, especially when it comes to development and upgrades. He even went as far as to say that overfunded enthusiastic developers are the biggest threat to Bitcoin. That seems like a pretty strong statement from someone who's so bullish. right?
Hmm.
It might seem counterintuitive, but his concern is about unintended consequences. He strongly believes in the robustness and security of the Bitcoin protocol as it stands. He worries that too much tinkering could introduce vulnerabilities or unnecessary complexity, potentially harming the network.
So it's like upgrading software on your phone. Sometimes those updates create more problems than they solve.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And Saylor advocates for a less is more approach when it comes to Bitcoin development.
Makes sense. Now, what about the transparency of MicroStrategy's own Bitcoin holdings? Has Saylor considered doing a cryptographic proof of reserves? This is something we're seeing more and more in the crypto space, where companies use cryptography to prove they hold the assets they claim without revealing sensitive information.
Yeah, he's addressed that, saying MicroStrategy undergoes regular audits and is committed to transparency and accountability. He acknowledges the complexities, especially as a publicly traded company, but it's definitely a conversation that's happening within the industry.
It's a fascinating challenge, balancing transparency with the need to protect the company and its investors. Overall, it seems like Saylor is incredibly optimistic about Bitcoin's future. He's certainly putting his money where his mouth is, both personally and through MicroStrategy.
Absolutely. He sees Bitcoin as the foundation of a new financial system, one that's more transparent, secure, and accessible than anything we've seen before. He believes it could fundamentally transform how we think about money, capital, and value itself. And as his own journey shows, he's not afraid to challenge conventional thinking and push boundaries.
He definitely has a way of making you rethink everything you thought you knew about finance. So what does he say to those who are still skeptical, who dismiss Bitcoin as a bubble or a fad?
He drew an interesting comparison to scientific discoveries. He brought up William Harvey again, the guy who discovered the circulatory system.
Right.
And when Harvey first proposed his theory, he was met with widespread resistance from the medical establishment.
Yeah. Makes you wonder, what groundbreaking ideas are being dismissed right now?
Exactly. And Saylor sees a similar dynamic at play with Bitcoin. He thinks people who are resistant to it are clinging to outdated ideas and frameworks. He's confident that as more people grasp Bitcoin's true potential, the resistance will fade.
Well, after this exploration, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty energized. Saylor's vision of the future is definitely thought-provoking, to say the least.
He certainly challenges us to think differently
Yeah.
about the role of money, capital, and technology in our lives.
Makes you think, right? What if all this actually comes true? Like nations holding Bitcoin reserves alongside gold companies, using it to manage their treasuries, individuals having it in their portfolios.
Yeah, it's both exciting and kind of scary at the same time to think about how much could change.
Right, like Saylor's ideas, they might sound crazy to some, but he's basing them on history technology and how money has evolved over time.
Yeah, he's got a point there.
He's not afraid to ruffle some feathers and challenge how we think.
He definitely makes you think.
Whether you agree with him or not, he's getting people to rethink the future of finance.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this so interesting. It's not just about listening to someone's opinions. It's about thinking about how those ideas could affect our lives and the decisions we make.
Right. Like this deep dive, did it raise new questions for you about how you view money? Or maybe it sparked an interest in learning more about Bitcoin and what it could become?
I hope so. That's what we're trying to do here. Encourage people to think critically, to challenge their own assumptions, and maybe even explore some new ideas.
Because sometimes the greatest rewards come to those who are willing to embrace change and forge their own path.
Well said.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Bitcoin at $100,000, we want to leave you with one final thought. What if Saylor's right? What if Bitcoin really is the future of money? How would that change your personal financial strategy? How would it impact your life?
Those are the questions that we all should be asking as we navigate this rapidly evolving financial landscape.
It's about sparking new ideas and challenging ourselves to imagine a different future. So keep exploring, keep diving deep. And thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.